You're listening to The Voice of Reason. I'm Dr. Len Saputo here with Francesco Garapoli. It's hard to keep up with all the things that are happening, and I have to say I'm a bit overwhelmed by it. But you know what, Francesco? I think it's about staying the course of the things we've been talking about the last several months. We got to do the thing that's right, the thing that resonates with us, the thing that is what's going to make us form a community that's oriented with a coherent field. If we do that, I think that we're going to be on the path that's right. And then whatever happens, we have to stay within our power, our own sovereignty, and see what happens.
You know, anytime we get tested, Len, it's always at that critical moment, not the beginning of the test. Usually can endure it. And in the middle of a test of any kind, we have coping skills, right? It's towards the end of that where we get battered and we get pushed. That's when certain people break down and they acquiesce. Yeah. Or certain people get angry and frustrated, and then they lose their center and then they get beaten. Then there's some who stay the course, who stay in their center, and they learn from everything that's happened, and they learn how to stay empowered. That's really the key right now.
Yeah, there's a calmness that comes with that, and it's deliberate, and it puts you in a focus that's the right one, because you can see what's happening without getting all emotional about it. It's the emotion that runs wild that causes the fear and the separation. We can avoid that and stay the course. We're on target.
And it's okay to feel that emotion, but feel it and don't let it own you. You know, it's like, so you get frustrated. Sometimes I get frustrated or I get angry, or, you know, I usually don't feel fear, but you'll say angry and frustrated, worried. But then I'll catch it. I'll identify what I just felt. And then I'll say, is that really me? No. Yeah. Do I want to let the situation command me, or am I going to command me through the situation?
Yeah. I think a lot of people just give up because they don't know what to do. And they're so terrified by how things are unfolding. And the uncertainty of it all keeps you in limbo. And when you're in that place, you lose your center of focus, you lose your concentration, you lose what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And in martial arts, we learn that is the key to losing, not technique. Technique is only a part of any kind of competition or sparring or even self-defense. I mean, a person with less technique but more center will always come out on top.
Yeah.
And David, your son, just sent a great information. I'm not going to talk about the town where he's from. I'll let him share that if he wants, because I don't want everybody moving there. But the sheriff, the sheriff just came out and sent a letter to everybody and said, I will not succumb to an unconstitutional demand for the police to get in the way of a person's medical choice.
Wow.
I'm telling you, I read that letter and my heart was swelling. He said in the letter, yes, we got to take care of people who are at risk. Yes, you got to be conscious of people who have symptoms. Yes, we've got to be smart. But if you're healthy and asymptomatic, the science is with you in a way that the police will not get in the way of your lifestyle. That is such an important statement, Len.
Yeah, it's nice to see people who have common sense. You know, all the things that are happening are not based in science. I don't know hardly anything with this COVID-19 that's based in good science. It's not about the testing. It's not about how you're recording the deaths. What I do think is happening is we're losing our middle class, and the good sheriff sees that. Why are we going to have to destroy our economy to try and protect the disease that's not doing that much to us when you look at the actual scientific data that's published by the CDC and other organizations that are tracking this?
Yeah, this is tough, Len. I mean, when we say this, it really is like scratching on a chalkboard to some people because they don't want to hear this. And we're only saying it because it's true. We're only saying that statement because it comes from the CDC. It comes from the FDA.
It does.
You know, when I say that these tests, these PCR tests are not accurate, I'm not just making it up, and I'm not reading it from a conspiracy website. I'm reading that from the latest FDA government reports.
Yeah.
So we've got to know, people have got to be willing to peel back the mainstream media and do the research, and you'll find out something that may be a different story than you think.
Yeah, well, it is. But when you're seeing only one side of the news, you know, if you're watching television, and everything is being conspired in a way to keep you from saying your piece. We have to have a way to be able to get truth out there from both sides. It's not just a matter of presenting one side. When that happens, then everybody only thinks one way. And until we change that, it's going to continue like this. So you have to recognize what's happening and find your own power, do your own research. And it's not going to be on CNN or Fox or any of the main stations, because they're simply censoring the information that's being presented.
Yeah, and it's not easy to find. I mean, David
No.
works really hard. He's a detective, besides being a good skier, he's a detective, and I think when he skis, he's in that flow where he's thinking intuitively. So when he does go into the internet, he bores down into information. He sent me something today, an interview with the mayor of New York or the governor of New York. I think it was the governor. I think Cuomo.
Yeah.
Okay. What'd Cuomo just say? I think we're being a little bit too heavy on these businesses. It's time to loosen up, because if we do this, our economy is going to be ruined. Now, this is the same guy who just said months ago that we've got to increase our pressures. We've got to push harder. We've got to shut down businesses for longer.
Yeah.
How could people switch their minds like this, Len?
Oh, they
What's
all
up?
are. They all are. This is politics. And that's how people exert their power. And when they get so they're desperate like that, or they feel like they're the king or the dictator of a state or a country, then there's a real problem, because you're not going to have both sides of the story. Fauci's changed his tune a number of times as well. Initially he said, don't wear the mask. That was back in March. Don't wear the mask because they don't do that much. Next thing you know, he's saying, you got to wear the mask and we got to have a mandate for it. And the same thing is happening with the vaccine now. It keeps changing. The target keeps moving. The idea was that if you had a vaccine, that everything was going to be fine. You wouldn't have to wear the mask and you wouldn't have to have the lockdowns. Now we're seeing it's another story. Plus, it's something I'm not even sure we need.
No. Well, the numbers would prove very clearly to any level-headed person that you don't need a vaccine for a disease that isn't that dangerous. The facts are showing us it doesn't warrant this kind of response.
Yeah, well.
And people are starting to know this. Back to New York again, I read that 200 vaccines had to get thrown in the garbage. Why? Because people who were scheduled to take them refused to show up.
Wow.
So this is not the kind of message we want. We either want people to be feeling very comfortable about a vaccine or completely against it. But people are vacillating, and they're not only just they're hearing different sides, they're intuiting that maybe there's something not right about this right now.
Well,
so that's a fact. That's a very interesting fact. This is a real fact, which has happened in New York.
Well, it's happening all over the country. You're seeing things change. And it's good to see somebody who could stand up and say, we're not going to tolerate this. I remember a few months back when the Highway Patrol was in Sacramento, California, and they were trying to prevent people from crossing a line because they were there in a peaceful demonstration. And somebody got up with a loudspeaker and he says, look, we're one. You guys that are there trying to stop us from crossing this line are one of us. Do you really want to oppose us? Can't we do this peacefully? And every single guy on the police force and the Highway Patrol backed off and said, we get it. And now we're seeing more of that happening, okay, with the sheriff of Davidstown and of people that are happening all over the country. And people are starting to rise up because they're seeing what's happening. You can see that the economy is going down. People are losing their jobs, their health insurance, and they're losing their homes, and the country is going down. Sweden came up with this months ago, back in April. They said, we're not going to follow the same path that you are. We know we're going to have the same number of deaths that you are over a period of a couple of years, and that's borne out to be true. But the difference is they said, we'll have an economy and you won't. And that's what's happening. We have to start thinking for ourselves that way, rather than just listening to what one-sided censored news is telling us.
It's got to come from the leaders.
That
I was
too.
in a store tonight. The manager of the store, I don't even know if she was really the manager. She was a middle level person, manager. And, she asked me to put my mask on. And she's helped me before with finding a product in the store or things like that. So I know she's sweet, but she looked at me and I said, the science really doesn't support this. And I always keep my distance. I'm very healthy. She goes, it's not about this. It's what I'm told to do.
Yes.
So, and so I felt for her. I mean, I really felt for her because she just wants to keep her job. She couldn't even reveal her real opinion
Right.
because she wants to keep her job. And some boss above her told her because he probably, or she wants to keep the business open.
Yeah.
So these are tough times because people don't have a voice because unless it comes from the top down, they're going to acquiesce.
Yeah. People have to step up to the plate. If they don't step up to the plate and think for themselves and not acquiesce, this is what happens. And we can't be run by mandates that are not based on reasonable things to do, particularly if they're not science-based. So we have to come to our senses and take the responsibility that our forefathers did. You know, they earned the right to have a country that was built on democracy. We've let it go. And now the corruption has created a situation where we have a corporate democracy. And we don't have a vote anymore that really means that much because whatever vote we make, you can't even be sure is going to be a legitimate vote from the point of view of what's going to be reported. And then where do you go from there? You have to come back and do your own homework, go to the grassroots level and start doing things that influence who's going to win what election and what they're going to do. And then hold their toes to the fire if they're in politics, which of course they are, and say, if you do this, that's what's going to happen. Maybe we have to take people down. We have to have a recall. Things like that are starting to happen in California, even with Newsom. You know, we've got about half of a recall done on him because he's acting like a tyrant. He's acting like somebody who's a king or a dictator of California, and people don't want that.
Yeah. But the sad thing is people have to trust the information they get.
That's right.
If they don't trust the information, they're going to be swayed to one side or another. You know, there was a time when we used to trust the news. You know, back when I took political science at George Washington University,
Yeah.
I did analysis of the news. Even back then, back in the 70s, I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I analyzed all the 3 top networks and I saw how their message was skewed. And I presented it to my professor as a high level, class report. He laughed. He said, it can't be really true. And I showed him the transcribed documents for the 3-month period that I used.
Mm-hmm.
It was fascinating. 40 years later, we're seeing the same thing, skewed messages. I stopped trusting them back then. Walter Cronkite was pretty much gone by then. Walter Cronkite, remember, he was a guy who gave an even-sided view. He told you both sides as a journalist.
Yeah.
People should go back and look back if you don't remember, if you're not old enough. This is when news was a news, and then you could make a decision.
Yeah, he didn't take sides.
No.
He reported what was in the news that we should know so we can have a voice of our own after contemplating both sides. That's gone. Who do you have now that's presenting any kind of news that's authentic?
Right. And transparent.
Opinions. Oh yeah, we're getting opinions and they're not transparent.
No, I mean, Walter Cronkite, if I remember correctly, you probably remember more than me because he made his debut really in World War II, right? And reporting on the front. That was Walter Cronkite's great start.
Yeah.
He would say, after he would present both sides of a story, very clearly both sides, he would say, and it's my opinion. Then you knew, right? There was a moment there he said, now I'm going to give you my opinion. I just told you black, I've just told you white.
That's good.
Now this is my opinion. People felt so good. You didn't agree with him all the time, but he was transparent about what was fact, at least from his viewpoint, and what was opinion.
Yeah. Well, we've got to re-engage ourselves into the democratic process where we do our research and then we come to a conclusion of how we feel. Then we do something to communicate with our neighbors. And it can be done at any level. It can be done at the grassroots level. It can be done at a level that's on the internet. There are always ways to get information out there. If we don't take that responsibility and we're just complacent that democracy is going to do what it's always done for the past couple of 100 years, then take a look at where we are. And if you've been sitting on your backside and you haven't been participating in the elections in a way that's looking at the details, not just the people whose faces are on the ballot, because a lot of the time you don't have a whole lot of choice. but you don't have a whole lot of choice because you didn't put any effort into seeing who would be the person that you want to be represented by a certain party or creating a new party. Are we in need of a third party right now? I think so. It's got to be different than what we've got, because what we've got is taken us exactly where we are. And now we're sitting in the stew and not so sure about where we're going. Do we have to wait till there's a catastrophe that's so bad? What's going to happen in the next 2 weeks in this country is absolutely paramount, very important stuff. And we should all be following it, and we should have opinions, and we should be communicating with each other at every level. If we don't do that, only God knows where this is going to lead us, because we won't be doing the part that we have to do to make some sense out of things.
And you have to ask what you're contributing to that
Yeah.
field. We call it the quantum field,
Yeah.
you know, in particle physics. There's this idea of this quantum field that we're all contributing to. And I think we've got to really ask ourselves, just like you said, am I willing to talk to people who don't have my same opinion?
Yes.
Am I open-minded enough to hear them and not push my agenda on them?
That's right.
Look for some common ground, what you have in common, because that will feed the field in a really powerful way. Because if we feed the field with fear or angst or anxiety, guess what the world's going to look like?
Yeah. Well, have a look. That's what it looks like now. People are falling apart. We're divided into separate little groups. We've lost our power for the most part. And we're at the hands of people who will do things to us that we can't trust. We don't know them well enough in the deepest sense. What we do is look at some of the results that come out and then try to make an intelligent decision about stuff we don't have enough information for. We got to go back and do the homework.
You have to, Len. And, you know, you don't want to be in a world where you don't trust your leaders. You don't want to be in a world where you don't trust the high-tech industries that you are funding. People forget we pay for them. And when they start to dictate what's truth and what's not truth, what's safe and what's not safe. I mean, certainly, I do not condone violence in any way, shape, or form. And anybody who's doing anything really hurtful or violent should be cut out. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater either. You can't say, I'm going to shut a whole platform down just because a few people on there said something bad. That makes me nervous. And we've seen it now with Apple and Google's threats this week, which is not a good thing. I mean, if you haven't heard about that, you should look into it, because I think it should make everybody, you know, think a lot about what's happening in the world right now.
Well, when you look at the high-tech business and the power that it has over the people, and that it monopolizes certain things, they may be private companies, but when they get big enough, they have an influence that's massive, and they can turn elections, they can turn public opinion about things that are important, and then we wind up going along with it because we don't ever hear the other side. The censorship is so deep and so profound that I don't have a clue of how I'm going to get accurate information when I turn on my television set. The only reason I do listen to these stations is because of you out there. I have to know what they're saying so that I can at least give you an opinion or some facts that are based on the research that I've done. That's where things are today.
Yeah, that's good, Len. It's really important. It's not easy sometimes to hear other people's opinions. You know, it's not, it might get you worked up, and that's okay. It's good to listen to other sides, because then you can really find out where you stand, and you might learn something.
Absolutely.
I'm always learning something from either side. You know, I mean, I don't fall prey to one philosophy or another, one belief system or another, one narrative or another, because, you know, each narrative, whether it's political or whatever it is, medical, it's going to be influenced by something.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Even the medical narrative, you can have all the facts in front of you, and two different people will interpret them differently based on their influence, their propensity to want to make somebody happy or another. This is important for people to know. There's no fixed truth, and that's okay.
Well, even the stuff that's published in the major medical journals we know is not accurate. The Office of Technology Assessment and a couple of big journals have reported on this, and a lot of editors in chief of big journals like the New England Journal of Medicine have come out and said, the stuff that we're publishing in this journal, you can't trust anymore. And why? And they've written books on it. Marcia Angel is a doctor who quit the New England Journal of Medicine after being the editor-in-chief, saying, I can't trust this information anymore. And if that's the truth, then what are we doing? So we have to go back and look at why things are like that. When you've got people who have a conflict of interest, who are publishing information in some journal that has been done through a quote, scientific study, and they've got something to gain from it coming out a certain way, they're not going to spend millions of dollars and then come out and say, don't buy our product, it stinks. Because they're business minded and because success is measured in terms of dollars in this country, that's the problem. Then you wind up with information that gets published that's wrong. And then you have your doctor who's trusting, thinking that, well, the stuff must be good, and maybe reads just the abstract of an article because it's too long for them to go through in detail. It would take you 2 weeks to do one particular journal article. So you tend to do that. If your patient's in the ICU and you're trying to make a decision about what to do, God help you if you're trusting what you read in that journal, because it very often is the wrong information. And when that was studied in terms of what the percentage of good, healthy information that's in the practice of medicine, I was very surprised to find out that 85% of what we do is not based on good science. Then when you look at how much information that's published in the major medical journals is good science, the Office of Technology Assessment said 1%. That is frightening. And that's what happens when you have information that's being published because of conflicts of interest and because of connections that you have that you can pay to get certain things done. That's business as usual now in the United States and around the world.
Sure. But don't you think that the individual patient, we'll call them in this situation, because when you're dealing with doctors, you're dealing with doctors or patients most of the time.
Yeah.
Could that patient become more empowered, both educated, both healthier, changing their lifestyle, learning more about themselves? So all of a sudden, they're not a victim when they come to a doctor, but they're a participant when they come to a doctor.
That's ideally the right thing to do, but I think of that a lot. And I take a great deal of time in explaining everything that I do to my patient who wants to take some kind of treatment for something.
Right.
And it's not easy to gain the wisdom that you have through experience. You can review the literature. People from other fields will review the literature. Right at the moment, I'm having a conversation with an attorney who thinks that the stuff that I'm talking about with the masks and with the lockdowns, that he's right and I'm wrong. And my answer to him is going to be, I went to medical school, you didn't. I've studied 1,500 hours in this stuff, you haven't. I've published at least 100 videos now with you, Francesco. And when you get to that place, we can have a conversation that makes sense. Now that relates back to the patient too. You can't, especially if a person's sick and they're in a hospital, you can't go through all the details of what you're doing. And some of that, they don't have the judgment for. Doing the homework, sure. Asking questions, absolutely. I always welcome that because I think that's essential for trying to make an intelligent decision. My job as a doctor is to be a teacher. And that's what the word dottore actually means, is It goes back to the word teacher. And that's to educate people. And I have to remember that I'm employed by them. I'm employed by the patient. And if I don't live up to what I should be doing with them, I can be dismissed. And that doesn't happen often enough in medicine. It's a shame, but it's understandable because of the complexity of things and the fact that you have a huge advantage with the education we have as doctors. It's not always right information to us either. It's a tough situation.
But patients know their bodies. That's
they
the thing.
do.
And they know when they're eating too many donuts. People know when they're drinking too many soft drinks.
Yeah.
People have to take responsibility. If you want to be a patient, you've got to be patient enough to ask yourself before you go to the doctor, what am I doing that I'm responsible for, that I could change, that may have led up to this disease state?
Yeah.
And I think that's what people don't do enough. So what happens,
Right.
they don't take personal responsibility. Then they come to their healthcare provider and they say, fix me.
Yeah,
And
right.
then the healthcare provider has really no help. He might say, or she might say, there's some lifestyle things you got to do. Well, it's hard for me because I got to drink sodas during the day or I don't
Yeah,
stay hydrated. Give me something. So they keep coming back to give me something. And the source of the give me is the pharmaceutical companies.
yeah, that's
So it's a vicious, not even a cycle, it's a vicious trajectory.
yeah, it is.
And people have to take responsibility. The pharmaceutical companies would never be where they were if people weren't so irresponsible about their health.
That's true. Yeah, I had a very intelligent attorney come in today. He's in his middle 80s and or early 80s, and he said, I'm overweight. My blood sugars are a little too high. My cholesterol isn't exactly what it should be, and I want you to help me to do this. And I looked at him and I said, well, how am I going to help you to do what you know you need to do? This
Right.
is
What are
going
you
to take,
willing to do? Right.
yeah, it takes determination. You have to be focused on exactly what you're trying to accomplish yourself. I can't come to house and monitor the snacks that you're having after you've already had dinner, or tell you to exercise when you just don't feel like it. These are things that come from the inside that you have to take responsibility for yourself. And he finally got it. And it was comforting to see that, because what we usually do as doctors is we get people back on their feet and back to work, and that's where it ends. But what can you expect when you have a 10 or a 15-minute visit and somebody comes in with a problem that they've had for years, and you're trying to deal with, how do I solve this? And then go to the deeper roots of why they're ill. It's not on. The system isn't built to do that. It goes back to what I learned in medical school when they said, be a scientist. Don't get connected to your patient. Don't do social things with them. Insulate yourself from them, because you have to be a professional. Now, that this is crazy. This doesn't really get to the deeper reasons for why people get sick, and it doesn't have anything to do with what they can do about it. You have to have a personal connection that takes time, and you have to be patient, and you have to listen, and you have to care. And it doesn't happen in any deep way in a 10-minute visit. And that's what corporate America has turned medicine into. I call corporate medicine.
Right. Because healing is really at the heart level. I mean, real healing is transformation, and the only transformation happens at the heart.
That's right.
So if the system has pulled the heart out of it, then it's left with only one solution, is the quick fix, and the quick fix tends to be some medication.
And temporary.
Right, and temporary, because that's what the disempowered person asks for. I want a quick fix because I'm not responsible for my life. So you give me a quick fix, and now we've empowered a pharmaceutical company.
And that's
So
exactly what's
it's
happened.
very simple. You
That's
can't blame.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
It's
I don't blame-
exactly what's happened in politics.
Yeah, and anything, anytime you give away your power. So I don't blame the politicians. I don't blame the pharmaceutical companies. It's easy to. It's great to point blame. It's not so easy to say, where was this sourced?
Yeah, right.
And it's in the people. And we have to take our responsibility, and we have to take our power back.
Well, we're slowly figuring it out. We have all these ideas of what to do. And what we've been doing has gotten us exactly where we are. Now, if you think that's okay, keep doing what you're doing. But if you do, there's a trajectory here, a fatal trajectory, that's going to cause enormous problems. We have to take our power back. And we can do that so easily just by watching the way we spend our dollars. If you don't pay for things that you don't want to support, that whatever that entity is going to collapse. And it'll happen just in a matter of a few weeks if there are enough people doing it. If we didn't participate in Google or in Facebook or in some of the other things that are out there and that are businesses like Amazon, and we just didn't spend our money there, what do you think? How long would it take? A couple of weeks, a couple of months? They'd be gone. And if we support our local businesses, which have been shut down, then we're talking about getting the grassroots of America back on track.
Yeah. So people have to take responsibility. And sometimes those aren't easy decisions to make.
No.
You can say, hey, I could save $10 if I use
Amazon.
the dark side.
That's right.
What can you say, Len? It's sometimes the decisions to make real good change are not easy ones.
Well, they're not convenient. They're not convenient.
not convenient. And sometimes you have to do things that are inconvenient. Sometimes I need to make a message. And if I want to make a message, I will do things that are not the convenient thing in the moment, but I feel better in my heart and I could sleep at night.
Yeah, me too. When I think about some of the things that we support, like buying foreign cars or any kind of foreign business products, we're looking at a way of supporting those economies. And if they are really our enemies for one reason or another, then we should be thinking twice about what we're doing. But we tend to look at our own narcissistic wants before we make those decisions. We don't think clearly. So we wind up buying that product from that country. They wind up making money off of it. And it could have been a US product that costs a little bit more to support this country. So it's not like I think one country is necessarily better than another, but when you're at odds with them, you have to be smart about what you do. It's the same thing about spending. Where do you spend your dollars? Who are you supporting when you buy something? Take a look at that, because it's not
important.
small.
Yeah, it's like when I buy eggs, for instance, or any of my food. I'm very conscious about the money I spend on my food, and I'm very conscious about what I put in my body.
Yeah.
So I know from lots of good research that a cage-free hen
Yeah.
will make a very high vibe egg.
Yep.
Okay, so free range is best, but cage-free is better than not. That's a conscious decision.
Yeah.
It's something that will take probably $1 more
Yeah.
each
Maybe.
time I buy a dozen eggs.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I have to do an inconvenient thing and spend a little bit more money on a product that I could probably save money on if I didn't. But I would have given up my integrity and given up on the knowledge that I know about what's right for my body.
Yeah.
So people have to think every product you buy in a store that's going to go into your body, whether it's shampoo on your body topically or whether it's food that you eat, you should read the label and be surprised. You should look at what you're doing. Look at the integrity of the company who makes that food, because that's going to vibrate in your energy field.
Yeah. Well, we can even we should grow our own food. Everybody should be growing some of their own food. Same thing.
Ideally,
some people have chickens, David has chickens.
Yeah, right.
and these are the healthiest eggs you can have because they're eating real food. The table
Right.
scraps and the things like that are perfectly nutritious, especially if you buy the way David buys.
Yeah.
So this whole business of how we conduct our lives, we could take another careful look at. And if we sit back and do nothing, we're going to be exactly where we are. If we change our spending habits and the habits that we have that determine what our lifestyle is like, everything can change. And maybe that's the message of the voice of reason, is stay the course, but be creative about looking at new ways to stay that course in a way that's productive. So the trajectory is going to have payoffs that are going to put you back in control of your country.
Right on, Len. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. Francesco, God bless you. What a privilege it is to work with you. We'll be back again. What the heck is today? Monday. We'll be back on Thursday. It just comes around pretty quick. And it's really an opportunity for us to be able to share the kinds of things that we believe in, that we think will be a contribution for the people that listen to us. So thank you for listening. Thanks for the support. We'll be back on Thursday night with another Voice of Reason. Have a good week. Take care.
Thank you, Len.